It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
They've found that adolescents experience more frequent, high-intensity, positive and negative emotion.
I could have told them that without doing a study.
This is really important. No, don't knock it. Don't say it's from the University of Duh.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
This is the episode that everybody looks forward to more than any other on the Happy Families podcast. So excited to be able to share it with you. What are you sniffling and laughing about in the background? Said that. The most loved podcast episode that we ever do. The benchmark. It's the moment in the month that everybody looks forward to. I'm Justin. I'm here with Kylie, my wife and mum to our 6 kids. And this is the Doctor's Desk episode. It's the episode where we dive into the science. We recognize that people are doing great research and that research can change our lives for the better. Why are you smirking at me?
Well, I know where we're starting.
Where are we starting?
Let's start with the mental loads mums carry.
Okay, we're going to work through 4 recent studies because there's been so much good research that's come out recently and we need to talk about it. This one was done by Headspace. The survey, in fact, there's some good and some bad in this survey. So as Mother's Day approached, Headspace, National Youth Mental Health Foundation, did a whole lot of research with young people and they asked a couple of questions. Here's the first question that they asked. Who would you seek support from if you were experiencing a personal or emotional problem? And 4 and 5, 81% of our 12 to 25-year-olds said it's got to be mum. It's just got to be my mum. Now, that's really great news, right? Because comparatively, 74% would approach their friends, 73% would approach their boyfriend or girlfriend, and only 60% will approach their fathers for support in tough times.
That's still a pretty good number.
I don't know, 60%. That means 40% are not looking at dad as being emotionally supportive. Dad's the one that says, you'll be right. You'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. And kids are actually recognizing that. They're saying, yeah, dad doesn't get it when it's hard. Dad doesn't know how to deal with this. That, I think, is kind of concerning. But there's a flip side to that, and that is that mum, therefore, in 81% of the cases, is the one that gets shouldered with the burden of their child's struggles. And so there's both good and bad news here. We know that it's really hard to talk about mental health. We know it's extremely important that kids have got someone to talk to. And isn't it great that mum is there? But as a mum to 6, every now and again, do you kind of go, I'm burned out. I'm over it. Do I really need to carry your load as well as mine?
I don't even need to answer that question.
So essentially, young people are turning to mums more for support, which is fantastic, but it does take a toll on mum. And that's what that research says. So as we move through the next couple of Doctor's Desk conversations that need to be had.
Are you going to let me say something or are you going to take over the whole podcast?
Okay. What do you want to say about it?
Well, what I love about this, in spite of the fact that it is a heavy load, is number one, the kids are coming to you.
Yes.
But secondly, it doesn't mean that I have to carry the whole load.
Oh, okay, great, yeah.
So when the kids come to me, it's a wonderful opportunity for you and I to connect and to talk about how we might best support her. Because while she's coming to me, it's because at this point in our lives, I'm more available. It might not necessarily be that they don't go to dad. It might just be because of circumstances, he's not as available.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean she doesn't or they don't want dad included.
So let's be really clear. When we look at it from this perspective, we are doing so with an expectation that families are functioning reasonably well, that relationships are safe, and that kids are able to have that quality connection, that sense of mattering and belonging, and knowing that they are unconditionally accepted for who they are. With all of those things said, overall, I think it's great that kids know that they can turn to their parents, and there's a little bit of good news in that research.
What's number 2?
Oh, you tell me. You decided that was going to be number 1.
Well, I think let's talk about emotionality in adolescence.
Okay, all right, no problem. So since 1904, 120 years ago, when G. Stanley Hall wrote the classic book Adolescence, it was the first time anyone had really talked about adolescence, and Hall is saying, hang on, there is definitely something going on here. I mean, we've known for centuries that kids in their teen years are a little bit different to everybody else. And he started to put a whole lot of stuff together. Well, we now know that there are dramatic social and biological changes that occur during adolescence, and understanding their emotional development through this period is just so critical.
Are you telling me that this is new news?
Well, Yeah, it is. So what's basically happened is Natasha Balin, Lauren Green, Renee Thompson, 3 researchers have written this really important article called Understanding Emotion in Adolescence, a review of emotional frequency, intensity, instability, and clarity. So what they're really doing is they're saying, let's take a close look at what's really happening, what's normative development, what's non-normative development, how does gender interact with emotionality, how does puberty interact with emotionality, what do we really truly need to know? And this is what they've found. As they've reviewed all of the research and looked at what's going on, Kylie, they've found that adolescents experience more frequent, high-intensity, positive and negative emotion.
I could have told them that without doing a study.
This is really important. Don't knock it. Don't say it's from the University of Duh, because when we've got the empirical evidence, then we can start to work out the best ways to interact with our kids. So let me just highlight a couple of things. More frequent emotions at both the high end and the low end of the emotional spectrum. That is the positive and negative emotional spectrum. So they experience joy. Have you noticed teenagers experience joy in ways that
it's intense.
We don't as adults. I mean, we have teenagers who say, this is the saddest thing I've ever seen, but they say it every 3rd or 4th day. Oh, this is the most incredible thing I've ever done.
This is the best dinner I've ever eaten.
There's never been a dinner like this before, but then 4 days later, they're like, oh, this is the best dinner ever. Like every now and again, I'll look at you and say, this is an incredible steak. This is a top 5 steak moment. But it's got to be pretty unusual for that to happen. But for teenagers, it's almost like they're experiencing the highs and lows of life at a greater intensity than...
then you've got the child who experiences the high and the low all in one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
She's laughing hysterical while she's sobbing.
I'm happy, sad, yeah. But not only do we have more frequent high intensity in emotions, but there is generally greater emotional intensity and greater instability overall. So G. Stanley Hall in 1904 with his theory of adolescence generated this idea that adolescence is a period of storm and stress. And that's really what these researchers are saying. We've got 120 years of research now that shows that this is what's going on. And it's also consistent with what we are learning neurodevelopmentally. I think it's fascinating to look at this. So,
well, I love that they've just described my home in 2 words with 3 teenagers, yes. Stress and storm.
Adolescents primarily respond to emotional cues with increased activity of subcortical circuitry. In other words, the emotional part of their brain, don't roll your eyes, the emotional part of their brain is fired up and it gets really, really activated. That's all it's saying. With regard to gender, Kylie, this may... just before we get to gender, I also have to highlight this. The researchers found frequent or intense emotions in a peer context communicate important information about the desirability of friendships and potential romantic partners. So there is an important social context to this high emotionality that we don't really show as adults. Now, let me get into the gender stuff. Findings from the review suggest that girls, well, let me ask you, am I going to say girls have higher or lower intensity and instability of emotions?
Do you know that when most people find out that you have 6 daughters, they literally look at you and say, poor you?
Yeah, they do. Which I don't understand because I love being a dad to 6 daughters, but you're laughing. So is it higher or lower? Let's just.
It's higher.
It's higher. Okay. I'm going to read this word perfect.
But do you know what? Stereotypically, our girls are more expressive. And as hard as that is, I would rather have that than the grunt.
You know what? Every now and again, I'd take a grunt or two.
Maybe.
This is what they say. Girls have higher intensity and instability of emotions. And this is critically important. Not only are they experiencing these emotions more, but they have a poorer understanding of their emotions than boys do.
I can't believe they're calling us unstable.
And they just said greater instability than boys. They didn't say you're unstable.
That's what they're trying to say.
They also say this. There is also preliminary evidence that girls have higher frequencies of positive and negative emotions than do boys.
Have you heard of the monthly cycle?
Well, there's that as well. But I just think about, I look at one of our kids who literally, she'll go from laughing to crying, if not in the same breath, within 2 or 3 breaths. And they're both as intense as the other. Like the intensity is just so up there. We know that well-documented neuroanatomical differences between boys and girls that can influence their emotional experience, different amygdala size, different functionality there. But the research is there. Last point that I want to make. I've spent a lot of time on this, but it's just fascinating for anyone who has adolescence. Given how puberty affects neurobiology during adolescence, there's a real lack of studies that show a relationship between puberty and emotionality. And I think that's fascinating. Maybe that there's just more research to be done there. But I guess overall, given the number of changes that adolescents are going through in pretty much every domain of their lives, it's not really a surprise that adolescence is a time of high emotionality. I want to emphasize this, though. The research has found that it's typical that not only are teenagers having more intense emotions than adults, and that those emotions are becoming increasingly unstable throughout adolescence, but increased intensity and instability of negative emotion has been linked to various forms of adolescent psychopathology, like anxiety and depression. And so while this is typical, we also want to make sure that as parents, and this is the critical reason that I wanted to share this, as parents, we need to be aware of our teenagers' emotional frequency, intensity, instability, and clarity, and provide them with the support that they need so that it doesn't develop into psychopathology, so it doesn't develop into anxiety, because it's normal that they're going to have these experiences. It's healthy as a general rule, so long as it can be well processed, and so much of it comes back to us.
Well, number 3 is a surefire method to help kids be pro-social.
Okay, let's do this one really quickly. It's really simple. I love this one. This is there's a guy who's been making a lot of noise lately with a brand new book. His name is Dasha Keltner. Dasha Keltner is the name of the guy. And I'm not sharing this study because it's in the book. I haven't read the book, but the book is called Awe, A-W-E, Awe by Dasha Keltner. In the book, the subtitle is The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. And so in this study with Eddie Brummelman and a couple of other colleagues as well, what they've basically said is this: we studied the effects of art-elicited awe on children's pro-social behavior. In other words, when you look at a piece of art that is awe-inspiring, what does it do to you in terms of the way you behave towards others, those who are specifically not of your in-group? They're not part of the people you know and recognize and get along with. So they've got 159 kids and then 353 kids between 8 and 13. And they had them watch movie clips that either elicited awe or joy or just a neutral feeling. And the kids who watched the awe-inspiring, the awe-eliciting clip were more likely to, in study 1, spend time on a task that was difficult and effortful, and then donate their earnings from being in the study, both study 1 and study 2, towards helping refugees. They also showed increased respiratory sinus arrhythmia, which is an index of the parasympathetic nervous system activating that's associated with social engagement. In other words, it's helping them to be calm and nice and kind. They're being pro-social. That's the simple way of saying the fancy stuff. What it's really saying is, if your kids aren't being kind and nice, get them into a situation where they will experience something that is awe-inspiring. This is why I always say that nature is fuel for the soul. We've found that when we step our children outside, when they're having a moment, when they're big on their emotionality, when the intensity is right up there, being in nature, staring at the sky, the clouds, something bigger than them, something that creates a sense of awe, is calming. It brings them back to earth and they become more pro-social. I think it's a fascinating study. Awe sparks pro-sociality in children, published in the journal Psychological Science in April 2023. Brand new research, hot off the doctor's desk.
Well, I guess that's why when I went to my very first art class and they had the art teacher's work up on the wall for me to look at, I was so awe-inspired by her efforts that I tried.
Okay, and it creates a sense of desire to create and master and develop as well. Yeah, I love this. Okay, cool stuff.
All right, last one.
Yeah.
Mental health and exercise.
Okay, this is a study that's just come out of the University of South Australia.
Are you going to tell me something I don't know?
Well,
Or are you just going to confirm something?
Maybe I'm going to
already know.
This is just something that every parent needs to remember. This is a great reminder. But you know what? I mean, it's new data. It's new research. It's only just been published. Joe Rogan was talking about it on his podcast the other day. That's how big this is. This is a big. It's a big deal.
Who's Joe Rogan?
Joe Rogan has probably the most listened to podcast on the planet. I think he signed like $100 million podcast deal. Can I have one of those?
Wow.
Let's dive into this. Published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, the review is the most comprehensive to date, looking at exercise as an essential for managing depression. The researchers found that physical activity is 1.5 times more effective than counseling or the leading medications. I mean, this is incredible. So what they've done, they've reviewed a whole lot of reviews. This is legitimate science. They've looked at 97 different reviews, 1,039 different trials, and 128,119 participants.
Wow.
And what they found is that physical activity is extremely beneficial if you want to improve symptoms of depression, anxiety, and distress. They found that exercise interventions that were 12 weeks or shorter were actually the most effective at reducing mental health symptoms. So physical activity makes changes, and it makes changes fast. Then it's just up to you to maintain those changes. And here's the critical thing. The largest benefits were seen among people with depression or pregnant and postpartum women, as well as healthy individuals and people diagnosed with HIV or kidney disease. I think that this is just a fascinating piece of research. The more that we do high intensity exercise, and they did say any kind of exercise is good, it's useful, and it will make a difference. But when you lift the intensity, you get greater improvements for depression and anxiety. If you do longer duration exercise, it has smaller effects compared to short and mid-duration bursts. There's just that motivation. It feels really good. And the last thing that I'm going to mention is that they found that all types of physical activity and exercise were beneficial, including aerobic exercise like walking or resistance training or Pilates or yoga.
I'm on the right path then.
You are. So that's the Doctor's Desk today. 4 studies that can help us to raise our kids and our families better and to be better ourselves. Number 1, your kids want to talk to you. They really do. So make sure that you're available for it. And dads, let's see if we can get that number up beyond 60%. Number 2, teenage years are an emotional time. So again, be available for them and ride out the storm and the stress. Study 3, awe-inspiring moments lead to better outcomes with kids. And study 4, move in nature. It's good for you. It's good for your kids. Kylie, what's the standout for you when you think about how brilliant today's Doctor's Desk has been?
Well, to me, it's all relational.
Uh-huh.
As we build strong relationships with our kids, then they'll be willing to come to us. They'll be more pro-social because we'll have awe-inspiring opportunities together. We'll take those opportunities. We'll move our bodies together.
Yeah.
And we'll recognize that the emotional storms that we're going through are just part of the territory.
You can see why this is such a popular podcast.
Amazing.
The Doctor's Desk. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rillon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. Hey, thanks for listening. Hope you're loving it. We'd love your feedback. Podcasts at happyfamilies.com.au. Let us know if you're enjoying the Doctor's Desk as much as Kylie or as much as me. And we'll see you tomorrow for I'll Do Better Tomorrow on the Happy Families podcast.